I mean, especially since even the bias word in expectation bias kind of makes you biased of just assuming it's negative, which it can be negative, so we should reduce that part, although there are positive parts to it, so the just automatic assumption can kind of be a problem. Expectation biases should be reduced in most negative situations, which can easily happen in everyday life. Like you might look at someone and be like, hey, they acted mean to this one person once, even if they had a bad day or something, you might automatically assume again that they're negative. We should find ways to reduce that. Now, the thing is, according to my survey, several of you forgot the speech that I gave, which is kind of understandable, a lot of technical information. As a reminder, expectation bias occurs when an individual's expectations about an outcome influence perceptions of one's own or others' behavior. This definition is by the role of expectation bias in neurocognitive trials. Basically, it's when we look at something and automatically assume, and it is how we just see things get changed by what we believe, even if it's barely founded. So why should we reduce it? There was one study called pattern-induced expectation bias and visual anticipation of action outcomes, which shown that in many sports players, including volleyball players, even a pattern can cause expectation biases and throw them off, even if they're professionals and know exactly what they're doing. Because if anyone like that can easily be led to wrong conclusions just based off of their expectation biases, it can really impact their careers. And negativity bias and infants' expectations about agents' dispositions shows how easy it is to judge people, and just based off of this type of bias. Because they had babies, like they saw that they automatically just had bad attitudes to people for one negative experience. So they could have a lot of positive experiences, but one negative one could easily make them feel bad about someone because it really just impacted their future biases towards that person. Now, how to identify it? The main part that nearly all of them said was to get a second opinion. There was one article, well, it's focused on teachers, but it has just some general life advice too, called Check Your Biases Lately, Reasons and Strategies for Rural Teachers to Self-Assess for Grading Biases. It says mostly to identify patterns that may cause self-bias. For example, if you have positive experiences, you might over-expect from them. You might think, hey, they did great. I'm just going to assume they're going to do great forever, even if they mess up something. Or they also say to make sure if you had a bad experience of something, to make sure to give it a second chance if you are able to just be able to reduce and figure out where your biases are. And another thing is, ask for an outside opinion. Like, although this was based on teachers, they specifically said to ask for a second teacher's help, but you're not teachers, so just go ahead, ask anyone whose opinion you could trust, who might not have those same exact biases that you do. And another article called Standing Up for a Change, Reducing Bias Through Interpersonal Confrontation says to ask anyone, although if you get an opinion from a peer, you're more likely to take it seriously than from someone that you might be biased against. So if someone says, hey, you're being mean to me, then you might be biased to think, oh, they're exaggerating. But that's exactly kind of where the problem is. So you're supposed to double check that. the ways mainly to reduce it, going back to outsmart your own biases, it says, well, where problem is okay, never mind. I read the wrong things there. According to Standing Up for a Change, it says biases are best reduced when you can both identify and want to change the bias. So you can't just change your biases if you don't see a problem, if you don't want a problem there. So you need to really have some sort of like emotional desire to change. Because if you automatically just assume stuff of people and don't understand that you need to change it, nothing can really be done that easily. So the first step of reducing it, know you have a problem. And one article called Outsmart Your Own Biases by Soul, Milkman, and Payne. Yes, I'm aware their names are kind of weird, but that's good to know. And it says, and I quote, "The problem is, unless you occasionally go against your gut, you haven't put your intuition to the test." This means that unless you know exactly what your gut is telling you, like unless you've seen and experienced what your opinions and biases caused, you don't know if they're accurate or not. So if you have time to look at it and time to investigate, do so. The article also continues on to tell us that we should try to put logic into what we think. Because a lot of this can be just solved by knowing that there's an issue and applying logic. Like, hey, there could be other issues at hand, try to identify them, and this can severely reduce their biases, which can affect you in negative ways. So, in conclusion, expectation biases can sometimes be negative, but we should try to reduce them best we can. Don't be afraid to ask others for help, because it's almost necessary to do so. And remember to just use logic and just be aware of the situation. I hope you use these methods to reduce negative expectation biases in your life. Wish you luck. Thank you for listening to the speech.